Welcome to the third of 7 videos from the Roman Army lecture on social origins and recruitment. In this third video, sort of building on the second video, I'm going to talk about picking recruits and the evidence for it in late antiquity, especially through the work of Vegetius. Okay, let me just get rid of my face. Okay, let's see. So picking recruits. Okay, so another important source for recruitment sort of overall in the imperial period, but also for late antiquity. And this is the reading I have you do for Wednesday. This comes from Vegetius, who possibly wrote a couple of things, but in particular something called the Epitome Rei Militaris, this epitome of military science, so to speak. It's a military handbook or manual. There are lots of different terms for what it is. Written in the 4th or 5th centuries. A lot of people prefer the 4th century date. I lean towards the 5th century CE date, but it doesn't matter necessarily for our purposes. It was actually one of the most popular ancient texts, at least in terms of, at least later in the medieval period, especially late medieval period heading to early modern era. A lot of would-be generals, commanders, etc. looked at this work and saw it as a model for how they might remake their own militaries. Much of it is concerned with the so-called ancient legion, as he calls it throughout the text in Latin. It does not explicit about which ancient legion it is or when the ancient legion is, which makes it a bit more complicated. He's using it as a model for how they might reform things in his day. One argument, which I thought was pretty good, has been put forth by a French scholar, Geniard, who argues that it's probably a late 2nd, early 3rd century legion. So some century and a half or two before his own day. So ancient enough, but not like Republican or anything like that. So again, this thing is largely focused on reforming the military, trying to make it better, especially the infantry. He doesn't have a lot to say about cavalry, which could mean that the cavalry is pretty good. And I say a lot of it is prescriptive. This is what we should do. This is what's done and what should be done, rather than descriptive, maybe describing how things were in his day. It's wide-ranging and part of this larger category of evidence. Can't make a shameless plug because the book is not in front of me. Anyway, okay. So some other things that he has a section where he talks about recruits, which is what you will have seen. And amongst the many interesting points that he makes, he talks about how recruits from the country are better than the city. He says luxury is bad. You want someone more experienced with a harder life. Younger people are better. Height is important. So we see some overlap with the laws, roughly contemporary laws we find in the Theodosian Code, of course. Face and physical posture are important too, which is kind of, a surprising thing. But, the other one talked about a bit about physique and so on. So we do get some similar shared ideas. Vegetius also goes to the trouble of identifying people from certain professions or jobs that he thinks are not suited to being soldiers, and those from certain positions that he thinks are suited to soldiers. So ones that aren't include fishermen, fowlers, pastry cooks, which is unfortunate because I love pastries, weavers, and those dealing in textiles. On the other hand, masons, blacksmiths, wainwrights, butchers, and stag and boar hunters are all seen as positives. Sarah Bond, who's a very big social media presence, has written some good stuff about this issue. Is worth checking out. Now, one of the important contextual things for both understanding some recruitment challenges in late antiquity to this period, reflected to some degree or other in those two texts, pieces of evidence, Theodosian Code of Vegetius, is a battle fought August 9th, 378 CE in Adrianople in Bulgaria, which is in more or less modern day Bulgaria. Well, actually, although I actually think it might be just slightly in on the across the border in Turkey. Anyway, so in this war, Valens, a Roman emperor at the time, and his Roman army, largely Eastern Roman army. So at this point, we have an Eastern Empire and a Western Empire, came up and fought against the Goths and Fritigern. Valens had the opportunity to get help from a family member in Western armies, but he decided against it. The Goths maybe weren't looking to fight. But nevertheless, this battle took place. I think Valen's looking for glory, etc., and it didn't work out as he'd hoped. This goes down as one of the most significant losses that Rome has ever had in its history. So tens of thousands of soldiers died. Our main source for the battle itself is Ammianus Marcellinus, who was in my source overview. He wrote the Vivid Stuff, 4th century, described his escape from Amida. He just about ends his text with this. Valens himself dies in the battle, and as I say, tens of thousands of Romans perished as well. So after this, the Eastern army was in a bad way, and they had to be a little less picky about where they could get recruits from. So all that business about mutilations and so on, some of it doesn't apply as well to this era. And we know that there were some recruitment challenges afterwards. Okay, and you could say that it's reflected in certain pieces of evidence, such as something called the Notitia Dignitatum, which is this wonderful administrative, bureaucratic, ideological list of offices and regiments and ranks in the eastern and western halves of the Roman Empire. Some suggestion that you can see new regiments came into being in the wake of this battle in the document, and then of course we get hints of this also in some other law codes as well. So there you go. The last of the points about the evidence for recruitment of late antiquity, drawing of Vegetius, which then sets up Adrianople, this big battle that there were significant recruitment challenges. And I will stop there.